You can't stop this chairlift, Mr. Peterson. HOA President Diane Reynolds stood beneath skiers gliding over my roof, smirking. She didn't know I was a retired Hollywood sound engineer with one mission: turn their luxury lift into a nightmare. How? By weaponizing 35 years of audio expertise to engineer terror no inspector could trace. This is how I fought back, and why their million-dollar mistake now haunts them. I'm Robert Peterson. After 35 years creating sound effects for Hollywood's biggest action films, I retired in 2020 with 2 Academy Award nominations and enough savings to buy my dream property, a timber cabin in Pine Ridge Estates, Colorado. This wasn't just any cabin. It was crafted from hand-hewn Douglas fir, set on 3 pristine acres with unobstructed views of Mount Wilson. The stone fireplace took a master mason 6 weeks to build. The custom windows were positioned to capture perfect light at sunrise. I had spent decades in soundproof studios making other people's visions come to life. Now I finally had my own piece of quiet perfection. My wife, Sarah, who'd stuck with me through countless late nights and stressful deadlines, fell in love with the extensive garden beds. Her rheumatoid arthritis had worsened over the years, making gardening in raised beds her therapy. Sarah's hands, once steady among her roses, now shook even holding a trowel. Her garden wasn't just soil and seeds, it was the last place pain couldn't touch her. "This is where I'll heal," she told me the day we moved in. The community seemed ideal, a mix of retirees and vacation homeowners who valued peace and natural beauty. The HOA was initially reasonable, focused on road maintenance and preserving the rustic aesthetic. I read every word of the covenants, examined every clause. There was nothing about future development rights or airspace easements, nothing that suggested our sanctuary could be invaded. For the first 2 years, we lived our dream. I built a workshop where I restored vintage audio equipment. Sarah's garden flourished. We hosted our adult children for holidays in a home we were proud of. We'd earned this peace after a lifetime of work. But peace has a price, and Diane Reynolds was about to send me the bill. The trouble started when Diane, a former resort developer from Aspen, moved in. She quickly maneuvered onto the HOA board, bringing with her ideas about modernizing Pine Ridge. Within 6 months, she was president. I first noticed something was wrong when I returned from visiting my sick brother in Denver. Survey stakes with orange flagging tape cut a diagonal line across my property. No notice, no letter explaining their purpose, just strangers who had accessed my land while I was away. At the HOA office, Diane's assistant seemed uncomfortable when I asked about the stakes. "You'll need to speak with Mrs. Reynolds directly," she said, avoiding eye contact. When Diane finally called me back 3 days later, her tone was dismissively cheerful. "It's just preliminary planning for our winter recreation enhancement," she said. "Nothing to worry about at this stage." But I did worry, especially when construction equipment began arriving at the community lodge: massive concrete forms, steel cables, mechanical components. A worker revealed the truth: chairlift installation, supposed to be finished before the first snow. The bombshell officially dropped during an informational meeting scheduled on a Tuesday morning when most homeowners were at work. I rearranged a doctor's appointment to attend, finding only 8 residents present in a community of 70 homes. Diane unveiled architectural renderings of Pine Ridges, exciting new amenity, a chairlift connecting the North Ridge to the South Slope, cutting directly through the center of the community. And there was my cabin, right in the path, with the lift passing directly overhead. "This will increase winter accessibility and property values," Diane announced, as if reading from a sales brochure. "The board has unanimously approved the project." When I raised my hand to object, Diane acknowledged me with a tight smile. "Yes, Mr. Peterson?" I explained that it crossed directly over my home, that I'd never received any notification, and that there was nothing in the covenants about such a development. She slid a document across the table. Section 37, Paragraph C grants easement rights for community improvements, and notification letters were sent in April. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Perhaps you should check your mail more carefully." I knew there had been no letter. I also knew that Paragraph C had been added during last year's administrative update, which homeowners were told was merely clarifying existing language. As I left the meeting, my neighbor Tom Andrews, a retired judge, pulled me aside. "This isn't right," he whispered. "She's running this place like her personal fief. But be careful, she's connected. Her husband's firm is doing the construction, and her brother sits on the county commission." I didn't waste time. The next morning, I contacted James Wilson, one of Colorado's top property rights attorneys. After reviewing my documents, his assessment was grim. "They've exploited a legal gray area," he explained. "The easement language is vague enough to be interpreted broadly, and courts tend to favor HOAs in development disputes, especially when they can argue it benefits the majority of residents. We filed an emergency injunction anyway, requesting a temporary halt to construction until proper impact studies could be conducted. The judge, a golfing buddy of Diane's brother, I later learned, denied it within 48 hours. His ruling stated that since the structure wouldn't physically touch my property, imminent irreparable harm couldn't be established. Meanwhile, construction accelerated. Concrete pads for support towers were poured overnight. Steel spans arrived on flatbed trucks. Workers cleared trees along the lift path, including 200-year-old blue spruces at the edge of my property line, trees that had been part of our view and privacy screen. Workers stared into our bedroom like we were zoo exhibits, Sarah lamented. Every laugh from the lift felt like a rock through our windows. I filed complaints with the county building department about work being done outside permitted hours and potential environmental impacts. Every inspector's sudden vacation and judge's prior commitment taught me the truth. The system wasn't broken. It was bought. So I stopped fighting their game and started playing mine. Inspectors would schedule visits, but mysteriously cancel at the last minute. One honest official pulled me aside after his supervisor overruled citations. "I can't help you officially," he said, looking over his shoulder, "but check the permit applications. There are discrepancies between what was approved and what's being built." He was right. The approved plans showed the lift path maintaining a 50-foot minimum clearance from all structures. The actual construction had towers positioned to create a path directly over my cabin with barely 20 feet of clearance, close enough for passengers to see into our bedroom skylight. Armed with this evidence, I returned to court, only to have my case assigned to the same judge who denied our injunction. He dismissed the discrepancies as minor modifications within the scope of the approved project. At every turn, I hit walls. The county commissioner recused himself from hearing appeals due to personal connections, but ensured the case went to commissioners sympathetic to development. The state regulatory board responsible for lift safety focused only on technical specifications, not placement or privacy concerns. Even the media wasn't interested. The local paper's owner had recently joined Pine Ridge's golf club, where Diane's husband was on the board. My calls to regional news outlets went unreturned or resulted in brief, dismissive conversations about typical HOA disputes. I was burning through savings on legal fees with nothing to show for it. Sarah's health deteriorated as stress exacerbated her arthritis. One night, I found her sobbing in the garden. She could no longer tend it because of the constant presence of workers. I knew something had to change. "They've got the system locked up," I told her. But systems aren't the only way to fight. On an unseasonably warm October morning, I was splitting firewood when the distinctive rumble of Diane's Range Rover approached. She parked at the edge of my driveway, emerging in a tailored black suit that seemed deliberately chosen to contrast with my flannel shirt and work jeans. Behind her, a young couple, the Millers from the North Ridge, rode the newly completed chairlift, testing the system before its official opening. They waved cheerfully, delighted with their elevated view of a property they had no right to look down upon. "Mr. Peterson," Diane called, striding toward me with the confidence of someone unused to hearing the word no. "I thought we should discuss the finishing touches before next week's grand opening." I set down my axe and crossed my arms. "There's nothing to discuss. This chairlift shouldn't be here." She gestured dismissively toward the lift. "It's already here, and it's going to transform our community." "It's transformed my home into a fishbowl," I countered. "People will be looking directly into our bedroom and living room." Progress always has minor inconveniences, she interrupted, but the board has approved an attractive compensation package. She extended a manila envelope, landscaping credits, complimentary lift passes, and a very generous adjustment to our HOA fees. I didn't touch the envelope. I don't want compensation. I want my privacy and peace back. That's no longer an option, she said, smile disappearing. The decision is final. The lift opens next Saturday. Above us, the miller's chair creaked slowly past, their faces now uncomfortable as they witnessed our confrontation. You can't just run roughshod over people's lives, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. There are proper procedures, impact studies, all completed and approved. Cut in. Perhaps if you'd attend more meetings instead of hiding in your workshop, you'd understand how community development works. That's when something in me snapped. 35 years of professional restraint, of keeping calm on chaotic film sets and meeting impossible deadlines, evaporated in an instant. This isn't development, I shouted, gesturing at the chairlift overhead. This is invasion. That's my home you violated, not some line item in your plan. Her expression hardened. I understand change is difficult for people of your generation, but Pine Ridge is evolving. Those who can adapt should consider whether this community still suits their needs. The threat was unmistakable. Get on board or get out. This conversation is over, she said, turning to leave. The lift opens Saturday. I suggest you use the compensation to invest in some decent curtains. As she walked away, I called after her, this isn't over. Diane, not by a long shot. She paused, glancing back with something between pity and contempt. It was over the moment the board voted. You're just the last one to accept it. Watching her drive away with the millers still visible on the lift beyond my property, I knew conventional means had failed. It was time to use the skills I'd spent a lifetime perfecting. Few people outside the film industry understand what a sound effects specialist actually does. We don't just record noises, we engineer emotional responses. The right sound, properly designed and deployed, can create fear more effectively than any visual. It's why the unseen monster is always scarier than the revealed one. For 35 years, I'd crafted sounds that made audiences worldwide grip their armrests, the metallic groan of a suspension bridge about to collapse, the ominous crack of ice breaking beneath unwary feet, the chilling whine of steel cables under catastrophic tension. My home studio contained equipment most recording professionals would envy: directional microphones, multi-channel mixing boards, weatherproof speakers that could function in any environment, tools I'd collected over decades. Now, they would be repurposed for my most important production ever. I wasn't going to damage their precious chairlift. That would be illegal and potentially dangerous. Instead, I would make people too terrified to ride it. First, I analyzed the lift's normal operating sounds, recording its signature acoustic profile from multiple positions. Then I designed a layered soundscape of subtly escalating mechanical distress, a slow-motion disaster unfolding in riders' ears. Lawyers failed. Judges shrugged. So I turned to a tool they'd never see coming, the same sounds that made movie audiences scream. Not crashes or screams, just the ping of a stressed bolt, the whine of fraying steel. Fear lives in the almost. Using specialized directional speakers, I could create a sound corridor audible only to passengers directly overhead, completely inaudible from the ground or loading stations. My decades of experience with theater-style surround systems made this precision targeting possible. The system would include low-level metal fatigue sounds, subtle creaks and pops that precede structural failure, layered beneath the lift's normal noise, progressive bearing failure effects, starting with barely perceptible grinding that intensified as each chair passed overhead, cable stress audio, a distinct high-pitched whine of steel under dangerous tension, synchronized with wind gusts using weather sensors on my roof, and subaudible frequencies that, though below human hearing, create physical sensations of unease. Everything would be randomized so no pattern emerged. It would activate only during peak usage times and bad weather, making it all the more convincing. Crucially, it would be completely undetectable without specialized equipment. Nobody could prove these sounds weren't coming from the lift itself. I tested a prototype by riding the lift myself after hours, having Sarah trigger various sequences. Even knowing what was coming, I was left white-knuckled. It was viscerally terrifying. The grand opening arrived with considerable fanfare. Diane arranged local dignitaries, complimentary refreshments, and a photographer from a regional tourism magazine. Residents gathered at the base station, excited about the luxury amenity that would supposedly enhance property values. I watched from my deck as the first chairs loaded. My system remained dormant, letting them experience a normal ride at first. Then, once the chairs began their third rotation, when enthusiasm peaked, I activated the first subtle sequence. The results exceeded my expectations. Midway across my property, the first affected riders visibly stiffened. Conversations stopped, grips tightened on safety bars. One woman pointed urgently at the support tower, whispering to her husband, who looked up in alarm. By the fourth rotation, the first panicked riders arrived at the upper station, demanding to speak with operators about dangerous noises and vibrations. Maintenance crews inspected the section above my property, finding nothing amiss. The fifth rotation brought the moment I'd waited for. A former structural engineer from Denver, visiting his son's family, activated the emergency stop after hearing what he described as catastrophic bearing failure. 27 passengers were left suspended, requiring an evacuation that lasted over 2 hours. Diane was livid, personally marching from chair to chair during the evacuation, assuring everyone the system was safe, even as engineers found no explanation for the reported sounds. When she spotted me watching from my deck, her expression could have melted steel. The next day, after extensive overnight inspections found no mechanical issues, the lift reopened, but word had spread. The first riders left until the cables groaned like a horror film. By sunset, the list's nickname trended, the Phantom's Ride. Ridership dropped by half. Those who did ride appeared tense, especially passing over my property. I continued deploying different sound sequences randomly, ensuring no discernible pattern. Sometimes the lift operated normally for hours before unleashing an unnerving combination that drove another passenger to reach for the emergency phone. Social media accelerated the effect. A teenage visitor's short video of a cracking sound overhead garnered over 100,000 views in 48 hours. Skiing forums buzzed with warnings about the haunted Pine Ridge chairlift. Within 2 weeks, ridership had plummeted by 70%. Emergency maintenance checks, each requiring a complete shutdown, became almost daily occurrences. Diane's response was predictable. She hired a specialized engineering firm to conduct a comprehensive assessment. For 3 days, they tested every component, replaced bearings and cables as precautionary measures, and installed vibration sensors throughout the system. They found nothing wrong. Next came the audio engineers, who recorded ambient sound along the route, analyzed frequencies, and tested for unusual wind or structural resonance. Nothing. Security patrols scanned for vandalism. Cameras were installed on lift towers, and a guard booth popped up at my property line. None of it detected my carefully calibrated system, which fell silent the moment inspectors drew near. Weatherproof speakers disguised within the landscape were visually undetectable. The financial impact mounted quickly. The HOA had banked on revenue from day passes sold to non-residents. That evaporated as the lift's reputation sank. Maintenance costs soared with each emergency inspection. Insurance premiums tripled after the carrier classified the lift as high risk. Diane grew desperate. She organized community confidence rides, featuring board members who publicly demonstrated the lift's safety. One ended with the treasurer's wife in tears after experiencing what she described as terrifying noises above my property. The confrontation I'd expected arrived on a Sunday morning. I was on my deck, sipping coffee, when Diane marched onto my property with 2 board members and an acoustic specialist. "We know what you're doing," she announced. "Your background in sound effects isn't exactly a secret, Peterson." I maintained an expression of polite confusion. "I'm not sure what you're implying." She scowled. "People only hear these mysterious sounds when they pass over your property. Coincidence? I think not." The acoustic specialist surveyed my deck. We'd like permission to set up monitoring equipment on your property. Do you have a warrant? I asked mildly. This isn't a criminal investigation, Diane snapped. Yet. Then you're trespassing, I replied. Unless you'd like to discuss rerouting the lift to restore my privacy. Her face flushed with anger. This childish sabotage won't change anything. The list stays where it is. Then I guess you'll continue having problems, I said with a shrug. Mechanical issues can be so persistent. Almost like karma for running roughshod over people's lives. Diane's smirk froze when the lift shuddered mid-sentence. Coincidence, she spat. But her trembling hands knew the truth. After they left, I adjusted my system to operate less frequently, but with more disturbing sound combinations, quality over quantity. The lift would run normally for days, lulling them into false security, before delivering an experience so unsettling that riders would never fully trust it again. The financial strain took its toll. The HOA announced a special assessment to cover mounting costs, trying to position it as unexpected maintenance. Homeowners, already skeptical, revolted at the additional fees. At the emergency meeting, the community hall was packed. Diane tried to maintain control, but residents demanded answers about escalating expenses. The chairlift was supposed to increase our property values, one vacation homeowner argued. Instead, we're known for a dangerous lift. My rental bookings have dropped 30%. Tom Andrews stood up and addressed the board. I've reviewed our financial reports. We spent $127,000 on unbudgeted maintenance and engineering consultations in just 6 weeks. This project was approved without proper diligence or transparency. The crowd murmured agreement. He continued, I move that we suspend lift operations pending a complete financial and safety review by an independent third party. Diane banged her gavel. Motion out of order. Operational decisions remain with the board. Another homeowner stood. Then perhaps we need a new board. I call for a vote of no confidence. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Diane eventually adjourned without resolution, but the damage was done. The community had split into factions, those who still supported Diane's vision versus those outraged by the ballooning costs and safety concerns. What followed was an unexpected alliance. Tom invited several homeowners, including me, to a private meeting. There, he revealed what his legal background had helped him discover. The chairlift project had bypassed several regulatory approvals through Diane's connections. The environmental impact statement was rubber-stamped without proper review. Safety certifications were expedited by her brother's office. Most importantly, the board had violated our own bylaws by not requiring a community-wide vote for capital expenditures exceeding $250,000. Together, we filed formal complaints with state regulatory agencies and requested a forensic audit of the HOA finances. Pressure from multiple investigations finally forced the county commissioner's office to act, suspending the lift's operating permit pending a comprehensive safety review. The timing was terrible for Diane, peak ski season, when the lift was supposed to showcase Pine Ridge. But with investigators crawling through the paperwork and experts repeatedly failing to find any mechanical explanation for the terrifying sounds, Diane's position became untenable. The forensic audit revealed further problems, cost overruns concealed from the community, no-bid contracts awarded to companies connected to board members, and reserve funds inappropriately diverted. At the February board meeting, homeowners packed the hall again, armed with audit results and regulatory findings. Diane attempted to maintain control, but the tide had turned. The chairlift project has cost this community over $1.2 million, Tom announced, nearly double the approved budget. It's currently generating zero revenue while draining our reserves through maintenance and legal fees. A motion to remove the current board passed by overwhelming majority. Tom was elected interim president, mandated to resolve the chairlift crisis and restore financial stability. His first official action was to approach me privately. We know what you did, he said without preamble. No one can prove it, but we know. The new board is considering options. Rerouting the lift would cost another $400,000 we don't have. Removing it entirely would mean writing off over $1 million in sunk costs. Difficult situation, I observed neutrally. We need a solution, Tom said. If these acoustic anomalies cease permanently, maybe we can recoup some investment and eventually fund a route that respects homeowners' privacy. I understood the implied offer. I've always supported responsible community development, I replied, with proper setbacks from residential properties. 2 days later, the board announced a phased renovation plan. Phase 1 would modify the existing lift to address community concerns, creating a bypass around residential properties. Construction would begin after spring thaw, finishing before the next ski season. Remarkably, the mysterious sounds plaguing the chairlift stopped completely. Maintenance tests reported no unusual acoustic phenomena. Ridership stayed low, but it was an improvement from zero. By the following winter, Pine Ridge had transformed. The chairlift now followed a scenic route that enhanced the community's appeal without invading anyone's privacy. The bypass curved gracefully around residential areas, maintaining a minimum 200-foot distance from any structure. Diane and her allies sold their properties and departed, replaced by homeowners who embraced transparency and respect for individual rights. The HOA adopted amended bylaws requiring a supermajority approval for major development. Sarah's garden flourished again, and my workshop became a gathering place for neighbors curious about traditional craftsmanship. Our home was once more the sanctuary we had worked a lifetime to create. At the winter solstice celebration, Tom raised a toast to community resilience and the power of standing firm for what's right. His eyes met mine briefly across the room, a silent acknowledgement of how we'd reclaimed our neighborhood. The haunted chairlift became local legend, with new residents whispering stories of ghosts and supernatural forces. I never confirmed nor denied my role, simply smiling enigmatically when the topic arose. Sometimes, standing on my deck watching the distant chairs carrying skiers along the new route, I reflect on what it took to protect our home. It wasn't just about privacy or property rights. It was about refusing to be sacrificed for someone else's vision. They thought retired meant powerless. But silence? That's my specialty. And sometimes the quietest revenge echoes the loudest.